a one-stop shop for services and information. Rod North is the Executive Director of Investor Relations company Bourse Communications, and he joins us in the studio. Good morning, Rod.
Good morning, how are you?
Good.
Michael?
Now tell us, that company tax cut that's now been scrapped, what kind of an impact will that have?
Well, I think that's come as a bit of a surprise to business because effectively small business represents something like 2.7 million small businesses around Australia, and that's the 80% of Australia that is part of the two-speed economy that probably isn't benefiting. And I suppose one of the things that's disappointing is that the Henry Review on tax made it pretty clear that over the medium term that the company tax rate should come down to 25%, and it's currently 30%. So the fact that that's not going to occur, I think, sends a few signals to small business that perhaps it's going to be a bit tough for the next 6 to 12 months. And of course, my concern about that is, and I'm still looking very closely at this budget, trying to see where it's going to create jobs over the next 6 to 12 months. That's one of the key things where I think we need to be a bit concerned, because we've seen the employment rate around the 5.2% level, which is still not too bad. But I think the concern is, unless we're giving incentives, particularly to that part of the economy, that 80% of the economy, the two-speed part of the economy that's missing out, I think it's going to create some problems sort of moving ahead when you're dealing with what's quite a wafer-thin surplus of $1.5 billion. I mean, it's interesting that even in the current period up to the 30th of June this year, the budget blowout for the deficit has blown out from 20 million to 44 billion. So, you know, where are we going to be sort of this time next year, heading to the 30th of June 2013, trying to see a surplus of $1.5 billion? I just think it's going to be a pretty difficult ask against a backdrop of more trouble potentially in the Eurozone. And, you know, some signs are a bit concerning in the US, particularly last Friday on the jobs numbers. So, you know, we've got a few tripwires ahead of us over the next 6 months, I would have thought.
So you think that's something of a heroic forecast, this budget surplus?
I think it's pretty heroic, and I think given that the budget deficit for this year was 20 billion and it's blown out to 44 billion, I find it pretty incredible to think that we could actually get a surplus in 2012-13 of $1.5 billion. I mean, that's a pretty wafer-thin position, with the fact that we've got Eurozone issues unresolved. You know, now we've got a new government in Greece, we've got sort of a change in France. You know, the whole sort of focus on Eurozone comes back. The debt issues haven't been resolved there. And we've also got the US, you know, still trying to effect recovery, but it's still shaky. So it puts our economy in a pretty vulnerable position, I would have thought. And one of the key things is obviously, you know, to create jobs, and the fact that 1% to you know, the company tax rate being dropped to 29 hasn't happened. I think that's going to create a bit of a problem for us.
The government has been trumping up the loss carryback scheme as a way of helping small businesses that are in trouble.
Yes, well, I think that creates a bit of incentive for some businesses, you know, those that perhaps have got losses now that can then offset against profits in previous years. But of course, that doesn't help the successful businesses, does it, at the moment? So it's a bit of, you know, take with one hand and give back with the other, but perhaps it's not sort of an even give back, in my view.
And just very quickly before we go, how do you think markets will react to this?
I think markets are going to react a bit softer today. I'm quite expecting that the Australian share market will probably drop 0.5%, 50 points or so, you know, largely off the back of the sort of overall world position. But I think that the view is going to be, we need to see how this is all going to work, and whether, you know, it can be achieved or not in terms of that surplus.
Rod North, thank you.
Thanks very much.
The whole morning's not going to be dominated, or not going to be wholly devoted to the budget, is it, Michael?
I'm glad you said that.
But we've got some news coming out of the United States that the acclaimed children's author Maurice Sendak has died at the age